The A-Team, 1983 to 1987, was the ultimate action-packed thrill ride of the 80s, filled with explosions, impossible escapes, and a band of misfit heroes who always fought for justice. With its unforgettable catchphrases, high-octane energy, and larger-than-life characters like Baracus and Hannibal Smith, the show became a pop culture phenomenon that fans still celebrate today. But behind the tough exteriors and iconic roles, time has taken a toll. Several beloved cast members who brought the A-Team to life have sadly passed away, some far too soon. In this tribute, we remember the actors who made the show legendary, honoring their performances, their impact, and the legacy they left behind in television history. George Peppard was born on October 1, 1928, in Detroit, Michigan, a city already crumbling under the weight of economic hardship. His father, a building contractor, fell into financial ruin during the Great Depression, and his mother, a former opera singer, clung to fading dreams of art and refinement. George grew up in a house filled with unrealized ambition and quiet resentment. It carved in him a hunger, not just for success, but for control over the chaos that haunted his childhood. His early years were shaped by a yearning to escape. Acting offered that escape, and he pursued it fiercely, eventually graduating from Carnegie Mellon and later studying under the legendary method teacher Lee Strasberg. Fame came suddenly in the early 60s, most memorably with Breakfast at Tiffany's, but he always chafed against the roles that defined him. Handsome and poised on screen, Peppard off-screen was brooding, combative, and often difficult. He wanted to be seen as a serious actor, but found himself increasingly boxed into typecast roles. By the time he took on the role of Lieutenant Colonel John Hannibal Smith in the A-Team, 1983 to 1987, George was already battling demons. Though the role made him iconic to a new generation, he despised television's limitations and the circus of celebrity. Behind the character's famous cigar-chomping grin was a man growing tired of performing, tired of pretending he loved it when a plan came together. Peppard's life was a slow unraveling. Alcoholism clung to him for years. His temper cost him roles, friends, and marriages, 5 in total. His third wife, actress Elizabeth Ashley, called him a brilliant man with a soul filled with shadows. Though he tried to change, quitting drinking in the 90s and reconciling with his children, the loneliness never really left. Fame had given him everything and taken even more. On May 8, 1994, George Peppard died of pneumonia in Los Angeles, following a battle with lung cancer. He was 65. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at $5 million. It was a quiet end for a man who had once lit up the screen, and had spent much of his life searching for something he couldn't name and never truly found. Lance Legault was born on May 2, 1935, in Chicago, Illinois, into a world already unforgiving. His father died when he was just 4, and his mother, left alone with 3 children, struggled to hold the family together through shifts as a cocktail waitress. Poverty was their constant companion, and young Lance grew up fighting for scraps, both at the dinner table and in life. There was a weight behind his deep, booming voice, even as a child. It made him sound older, tougher, almost dangerous. That presence, gritty, undeniable, would later define his acting career. He started humbly as a stunt double for Elvis Presley, mirroring a legend's moves while staying forever in the shadows. It was fitting. Lance was always just outside the spotlight, close enough to feel the heat, but rarely allowed to bask in it. His breakout came in the 1980s, when he was cast as the relentless Colonel Roderick Decker in the A-Team, 1983 to 1986. The role suited him, military, intense, commanding, but it also boxed him in. Typecast as a villain, Lance longed to show depth, vulnerability, soul. But Hollywood only wanted his growl, not his grief. The quiet tragedy of Lance's career was that his talent was often drowned out by his type. He wanted to be more than the muscle, but the doors for nuance rarely opened. Behind his intimidating persona was a man who loved music, who once dreamed of singing instead of chasing fugitives on screen. Those dreams faded quietly. His personal life was more stable, on paper. He married Teresa in 1984, and they remained together until his death. But even their long marriage couldn't erase the scars of being overlooked for decades. Friends said he smiled less in his later years, growing more withdrawn, as if the years of near success had finally taken something from him that couldn't be replaced. On September 10, 2012, Lance Legault died in Los Angeles at the age of 77. The cause was heart failure. His estimated net worth at the time of death was around $2 million, a modest sum for a man whose voice and face had etched themselves into a generation's memory. He left behind a legacy of roles that roared, but a life that often whispered for more. Della Reese was born Della Reese early on July 6, 1931, in the smoky streets of Detroit, Michigan, during the darkest years of the Great Depression. Her father worked in the auto factories. Her mother, a cook and laundress, died when Della was only a teenager. That loss shattered her, leaving a hole in her chest that music alone couldn't fill, but she tried. From church choirs to jazz clubs, she poured her grief into song, not to chase fame, but to survive. By her early 20s, Della had climbed out of poverty on the strength of her voice, silky, strong, mournful. Her gospel roots evolved into a jazz and pop career that brought her success in the late 1950s, including a Grammy nomination. But that glitter was deceptive. In an industry that praised her voice but hesitated to give a black woman a leading spotlight, Della fought constantly for space, for dignity, for recognition. She suffered financial setbacks and career lulls. And through it all, she never stopped grieving, for the mother she lost, for the childhood she couldn't reclaim. In 1985, she appeared as Aunt Martha in the A-Team, a brief but tender role that showed a different side of her, nurturing, grounded, maternal. But even as television embraced her more warmly in later years, most notably in Touched by an Angel, her life behind the scenes was often marked by illness and pain. She endured a near-fatal brain aneurysm in 1979 and later developed type 2 diabetes. Her health battles became part of her public mission, but they quietly drained her. Her personal life was no less fragile. She was married 4 times, though only her 4th marriage, to Franklin Lett, brought any lasting peace. The deaths of her children, including her adopted daughter, who passed away in 2002, devastated her. She spoke about faith, about healing, but her eyes often told another story, of a woman carrying immense sorrow behind a graceful smile. Della Reese died on November 19, 2017, at her home in Encino, California, at the age of 86. Her net worth at the time of her death was estimated to be around $3 million. It was never about the money. Della's true wealth was in the pain she transcended, and in the way she turned it into something beautiful, even when her own heart remained quietly broken. Robert Vaughn was born on November 22, 1932, in New York City, but the glamour of that metropolis never reached his childhood. Raised primarily by his grandparents in Minnesota after his parents, both struggling entertainers, separated, Vaughn's early life was shaped by a quiet instability, one that left him feeling perpetually unwanted. His mother, an actress, drifted from role to role, and Robert spent many of his formative years unsure of where he belonged. That uncertainty became the seed of his lifelong desire to be admired. He found fame as suave spies and commanding officers, but his most chilling portrayal came in the A-Team as General Hunt Stockwell, a shadowy figure who masked manipulation behind authority. His performance resonated because it wasn't far from the man himself. Vaughn in life wielded control with charisma, but beneath it he often feared he was not in control of anything at all. Though his career had peaks, like the man from the A-Team, he spent much of the 1970s and 80s battling obsolescence in Hollywood. Offers slowed, and roles became shallow. He kept showing up in television out of necessity, not choice. Stockwell came to him at a time when Vaughn was painfully aware that leading man roles were behind him. His real failure, though, was emotional. He was never quite able to connect. He chased accolades not out of ego but out of a desperate need to be enough. In his private life, Vaughn projected calm sophistication, but those close to him saw the emotional distance. He didn't marry until 1974 at the age of 41, to Linda Staub. It was a union built more on appearance than affection. They adopted 2 children, but Vaughn remained distant. Never cruel, never absent, just unreachable. He lived in the same house as his family, yet often felt like a ghost moving through it. Beneath the tuxedos and polished interviews, Vaughn struggled with fear of fading relevance, of being alone, of being forgotten. Cancer came in the end like a quiet thief, and on November 11, 2016, just shy of his 84th birthday, Robert Vaughn passed away in Ridgefield, Connecticut. His net worth at the time was approximately $10 million, yet no sum could quiet the question that haunted him all his life. Was it ever really enough? Richard Anderson was born on August 8, 1926, in Long Branch, New Jersey, during the unforgiving years between 2 wars. His father abandoned the family when Richard was still a boy, and his mother, working long hours to support them, had little time left for tenderness. That emptiness shaped him. He grew up craving structure, discipline, and above all, recognition. The military roles he would later embody on screen were not an act. They were a reflection of the control he never had as a child. After serving in the U.S. Army, Anderson studied at the Actors Studio, but fame came slowly. He was cast in dozens of supporting roles in the 1950s and 60s, his sharp jaw and cool voice perfect for playing men of order. But inside, he often questioned whether he was simply a prop, a type, rather than a true actor. He ached for deeper parts, more honest roles, but they rarely came. In the A-Team, Anderson portrayed General Fulbright from 1984 to 1986, a high-ranking officer chasing the titular group with relentless authority. Yet there was always something sad behind his performance. His character was a man doing what he was told, not necessarily what he believed. That nuance wasn't written in the script. It came from Anderson himself, who knew what it meant to be caught in a system that didn't care about personal truth. Off-screen, Richard was courteous, intelligent, but emotionally reserved. He married Catherine Thalberg, the daughter of a Hollywood power couple, but the marriage collapsed in 1973 after years of quiet distance. They had 3 daughters, yet Anderson often struggled to bridge the gap between affection and discipline. He loved deeply but expressed it awkwardly, often through advice rather than comfort. "I did my best," was something he once told a friend, not as pride, but as an apology. As the years passed, roles became fewer. He reprised his famous character Oscar Goldman from the $6 Million Man in TV movies, but he knew the spotlight had moved on. That decline stung, even if he never admitted it. Pride kept him from complaining, but friends saw it in his eyes. An ache for relevance, a hunger for meaning. Richard Anderson died on August 31, 2017, at the age of 91 in Beverly Hills, California, from natural causes. At the time of his passing, his net worth was estimated at $1.5 million, a quiet sum, much like the man himself. He left behind a legacy of firm voices and stiff uniforms, but those who knew him best remember a man who, despite a life of playing figures of control, never fully found peace within himself. Paul Gleason, born on May 4, 1939, in Jersey City, New Jersey, carried an edge with him from childhood, a sharpness born not of ambition, but of chaos. His father, a professional boxer, was frequently absent, and when he was present, he brought volatility instead of stability. Paul grew up in a household where tension was constant, and love, if it existed, came laced with conditional silence. He learned early to mask his vulnerability with toughness, a mask he would wear for the rest of his life. Though Gleason began his adult years chasing a baseball dream, briefly playing in the minor leagues, injury and disappointment redirected him to acting. In Hollywood, his intense stare and commanding presence won him a string of authority figure roles. But none would ever capture his inner life more subtly than his turn as Colonel Briggs in the A-Team from 1984. That character, cold, uncompromising, and blindly driven by protocol, was a mirror. Gleason wasn't acting. He was channeling the father he could never impress, the pressure he could never shed. His breakout role as the disciplinarian Principal Vernon in the A-Team made him famous, but it also typecast him. The public wanted the hard-nosed figure. No one asked if he was tired of being hated on screen. He rarely turned roles down. He couldn't afford to. There were times, in the leaner years, when he feared becoming invisible. He resented it, but he needed the work. Each no from a casting call struck like another blow to the man who once hoped to be an artist. Behind closed doors, Paul was more fragile than anyone guessed. His marriage to actress Candy Moore ended in divorce after just a few years. Friends said he was devoted, but unable to soften. He had a daughter, Shannon, and though he loved her deeply, he never quite knew how to show it. His need for control often suffocated his relationships. Emotional expression for him was dangerous terrain. He stuck to sarcasm or silence. When Gleason was diagnosed with pleural mesothelioma in early 2006, likely from asbestos exposure years prior, he accepted the news with stoic disbelief. His life, a quiet struggle for relevance and connection, ended on May 27, 2006, in Burbank, California. He was 67. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at $2 million, a modest sum for a man who had left a mark on a generation, even if he never quite felt it himself. Charles Napier was born on April 12, 1936, in Mt. Union, Kentucky, a town as hard-edged as the voice he'd one day make famous. Raised in rural poverty by a single mother after his father walked out, Napier grew up angry. The hills around him were quiet, but inside, his spirit was restless. He wrestled with feelings of abandonment, masking pain behind a facade of tough masculinity that would define his life and career. Though he served in the army and earned a degree in art, Napier's path into acting didn't begin until his 30s, after years of drifting and failed jobs. Hollywood didn't open its arms easily. His craggy features and steely voice typecast him as military men, villains, and brutes. It was in the A-Team from 1984 to 1986, where he played both Colonel Briggs and Deke Logan, that his presence was most deeply felt, embodying the authority figure who chased justice with clenched fists and clenched teeth. Yet behind those fierce roles was a man wounded by invisibility. Napier never truly escaped the frustration of being a character actor. In the A-Team, he was often passed over, rarely the lead, almost never praised. His bitterness grew with each missed opportunity. He once said, "I was the guy who always got killed," a half-joke laced with truth. Inside, he longed to show more than fury, but no one asked him to. Marriage offered no real refuge. His first marriage ended in quiet collapse, and although he later married again and had children, he remained emotionally distant. Work consumed him. He could roar on screen, but at home he often retreated into silence, drinking in solitude. The more he aged, the more he feared fading into nothing. He often battled with feelings of being underappreciated, and that pain bled into his roles. His anger always real, his eyes always searching. On October 5, 2011, Charles Napier died from complications following deep vein thrombosis at a hospital in Bakersfield, California. He was 75. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at just under $1 million. A modest sum for a man who appeared in over 200 films and shows, but never quite escaped the shadows of his own past. Behind the voice that barked orders was a heart that never stopped longing, for recognition, for tenderness, for something more than just being the man who always got killed. Henry Silva was born on September 23, 1926, in Brooklyn, New York, to Sicilian and Spanish parents who barely spoke English and struggled to survive in a slum where heat was a luxury and silence was survival. He grew up fatherless, in a tenement where the walls were thin and tempers even thinner. By age 8, he was working menial jobs to help feed his family. Hunger, both literal and emotional, shaped him. It never left. Silva's face became one of the most recognizable in Hollywood, not for heroism, but for menace. He played gangsters, hitmen, and cold-hearted killers. In the A-Team, 1985, he portrayed Johnny Christian, a ruthless villain whose eyes seemed devoid of remorse. But those same eyes, off-screen, were windows to a man who knew what it meant to be cast aside. He wasn't drawn to villains because he liked them. He understood them. Breaking into acting was almost impossible. Hollywood in the 1950s rarely welcomed men of ethnic ambiguity, and Silva's sharp, hawk-like features became both his curse and calling card. He trained at the actor's studio, scrubbing floors by day and studying drama by night. He landed roles, but never trust. He was always the other, always type. He spent decades playing killers while dreaming of playing fathers, teachers, poets. The industry never gave him the chance. Silva's personal life reflected the tension of a man always halfway in shadow. He married and divorced twice, each relationship buckling under the weight of emotional isolation. He had 2 children, but he struggled to connect, always carrying the scars of a childhood where love was survival, not warmth. Fame never softened him. He remained wary, private, haunted. By the 1990s, roles slowed. His final performances were quiet, often overlooked. Though his image was immortalized in noir and action, his heart beat quietly beneath the surface, often unseen. He once said in an interview, "I just wanted to be respected, not remembered." It was the closest he came to admitting how lonely the journey had been. Henry Silva died on September 14, 2022, in Los Angeles, just 1 week shy of his 96th birthday. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at $5 million, an ironic reward for a life spent playing the man nobody wanted to become. And yet, in every cold stare he delivered on screen, there was a flicker of humanity, of a boy from Brooklyn who never stopped hoping someone would see past the villain and into the man. Bobby Bass was born on August 6, 1936, in Jefferson County, Kentucky, in a world far from the spotlights that would one day blaze above him. His early years were marked by poverty and instability, his father absent, his mother stretched thin raising several children. Violence lingered around his childhood like a permanent storm cloud. To survive, Bobby learned to be quick on his feet, physically tough, emotionally silent. That silence would become his trademark. He didn't come to Hollywood looking for fame. What he found was something quieter: danger, challenge, and anonymity. As a stuntman, Bobby Bass made a living by falling from buildings, crashing cars, and taking punches meant for stars. He appeared in the A-Team across 3 episodes between 1983 and 1986, often uncredited, as henchmen, thugs, or background muscle. The pain was real, the recognition minimal. He joked that his job was to be invisible while being thrown through glass. But there was heartbreak beneath the bruises. Bass knew he would never be the face on the poster. He trained some of Hollywood's biggest names, Christopher Reeve for Superman, Danny Glover for Lethal Weapon, yet his name rarely appeared in the credits that mattered. He wanted more than danger. He wanted respect. And in the quiet moments, when the cameras stopped, that longing grew heavy. His work ethic was unshakable, but it came at a cost. Years of impacts, falls, and high-speed collisions took a toll on his body. His marriage unraveled under the weight of long shoots and silent suffering. Though he had a family, Bass often kept his pain from them. He was always the strong one, even when it broke him. His body aged faster than his spirit. In his later years, Bobby became a mentor to younger stunt performers, but he watched sadly as CGI began to replace the real danger he had once mastered. "They'll never know what it's like to hit the ground for real," he once said. On November 7, 2001, Bobby Bass died in Los Angeles from Parkinson's disease at the age of 65. His estimated net worth at the time was $500,000, for a man who risked his life hundreds of times so others could shine. He never got the applause. But every time a hero flew through the air or beat impossible odds, Bobby Bass was there, invisible, bruised, and quietly legendary. Which character from the A-Team holds a special place in your heart? How does it make you feel knowing that some of the beloved cast members are no longer with us? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to share them in the comments below. If you've been enjoying this content, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching.